Boo, 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 boo. Hey everybody. Good morning. Come on in here. Grab your beverage. We're going to do a little simultaneous sipping because that's the best way to enjoy delicious coffee. Everybody, simultaneous sip. Oh. Okay, somebody said to hold up until you grab your beverage. So get ready. There's still time. Grab your beverage. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Run back to your screen. Hurry. All right, here we go. Good stuff. So, lots of stuff happening today. You may have seen already my blog post about the fake news awards. I'll hit some of the high points, but you can go to dilbert.com and hit the blog button if you want to read it. So I give the president an A+ in persuasion for the way the fake news awards were all handled. Some of the high points are, number one, he made us wait for it. He built anticipation. That was all good. It makes us really focus on it. And whatever you focus on, you interpret as the important things, even if they aren't important. So focus makes you think things are a higher priority just because you're thinking about them. So he makes us think about it. He makes us think about fake news. A few other things he did right are, first of all, having a fake news award at all is provocative and unusual, and because it's provocative and unusual, you can't look away. So this is another example of how the president has combined theater and politics in a very effective way. You know, not in the jokey way, oh, he's just a big old clown, but in a way that really, really works. It's not an accident. A few other things he did well are, a lot of people asked, why didn't he do this on TV? Why didn't he have an awards event and televise it? We all wanted to watch it. But don't confuse your desire to watch it on TV, and I shared that same desire, with whether or not it would have been a good idea for the president to put it on TV. And I think putting it on TV would have been a trap, because we hold in our minds what an awards ceremony should look like. It would have been hard to find that sweet spot, because if he did something big and glitzy like an award show, you would have said, why is he spending all his money on an award show? Why isn't he focusing on running the country? So it really wouldn't have been a good idea to do something big and glitzy. And if he did something too small, say just a press conference where he read out the list, you'd be disappointed. You'd say, I was really hoping for, actual awards and some visuals and maybe a crowd. So there wasn't really any way to hit the sweet spot. There wasn't any sweet spot to do a live event. And I think they probably discussed it. I'm sure it was on the table at one point, but when they discussed it, wise people decided not to, and obviously the president has the final call on that. So it was the right decision to build it up and then give it to us in written form. The reason it was good in written form, there's several reasons. One is that it can show the fake news and then show the correction to it from another news site on the same page. So you didn't have to wonder if the president was exaggerating, is he making this up? You could see the story, and then you could see right below it, written on a list where it can't be changed. Well, here's the correction where they said, oops, or some other news organization blamed the other one, which was even more perfect, making the news organizations eat themselves. Don Jr. Tweeted, I think it was this morning or maybe yesterday, that the news organizations are essentially cannibalizing each other, saying saying that he's causing them to argue which one is the more fake one, which is, you can't get any better than that. The the other reason it was brilliant to do it in written form and not in televised form is that if you can imagine the visual of having the President of the United States talking maybe for 45 minutes, doing nothing but attacking the press. There is no way to shade that to make it not look like a dictator, because the press had set him up to do something that looked like a dictator trying to fight against the legitimate press. So instead of standing there and creating a visual and a news clip that would clearly show a president railing against the press, he goes a different direction. And this was kind of brilliant, and he shows it in written form so that the fake news story is shown, and then the refutation to the fake news story is from another news source, and a big one like the Washington Times, for example, or the Washington Post. So he took himself essentially out of the judging, which is very powerful. It wasn't Trump against the media. He gave us a list that was the media against the media. All we did is read it. So there were so many ways he could have done this wrong. It would have been easy for him to just stand up there, take the stage, take the glory, be the center of attention. And he doesn't shy away from being the center of attention. So this was a real decision, right? This was a considered decision to take himself off the spotlight and put the spotlight on the fake news. Really deftly done, I would say. And then the other thing he did right is the pacing and leading. So he starts right off. Well, let's start off with number one. Number one was Paul Krugman. So you'd have to ask yourself, is this really fake news, or is this just somebody who made a bad prediction? Because bad predictions are not fake news. They're just bad predictions. So Paul Krugman made a bad prediction. He said that the stock market, he indicated it would likely tank and never recover under President Trump. Obviously, it went in exactly the opposite direction of his prediction. That's not exactly fake news, but what's brilliant is it makes you wonder what fake news is. So you start arguing with yourself, hey, is this fake news or is this just a bad prediction? But it doesn't matter. Whether you decided it was fake news or you decided it was an overreach of what you defined as fake news, you were thinking about it. You were focusing on it. You were debating it. It became part of you, right? That was the persuasion, to make you think, focus, debate it. But when you were done, you did say to yourself, okay, there was somebody who should have been credible, not just credible, but really credible, Nobel Prize winning credible, and he was not. So it's a perfect launching point, because it first makes you wonder if his fake news definition is one you agree with, but it certainly makes you focus on it, and it puts the economy number one. All right, so it was the best he had in the category of economic fake news. So it was good as a priority, it was good to be number one, and it was good to make you wonder, hey, let me think about this. Was this really fake news or just a bad prediction? But he wins either way. So whichever way you come to think of it, he still got his point across. Right? Then you go through 9 other examples that are pretty clearly an inaccurate story that was negative to him and later got corrected. Those are indisputable. They were real news that was wrong. And then you get to the 11th item on the list. And this is the clever part, because by the time you've done 10 of these, you're saying to yourself, well, I kind of thought there would be more bullshit here. I kind of thought he'd be, maybe it would be a fake news award. You probably went into it thinking he's gonna maybe do a lot of overreaching here to describe what he decides is fake, but they're not. they're pretty solid. You're like, oh yeah, that's definitely fake. There's the correction right there. Oh, that's fake. There's the correction. That's fake. There's the correction. Can't doubt it. He gets the 11th one, and he lists that as the Russian collusion hoax, as he calls it. Now, you can't prove a negative, so it's not possible to prove that something didn't happen, generally speaking. You can prove something happened, but it's hard to prove that something didn't happen. So this last one didn't quite fit into the definition of fake news, in the sense that the news industry had itself debunked the news. They're just still working on it. But because you've seen all these examples that are clearly fake, by the time you get to that last one, which is really important to him, you've kind of conflated it with all the other things which have, started down as true-ish and then turned out to be clearly fake. And in your mind, you apply the same pattern to this last one. So it's solid gold persuasion. And as I said in my blog post, a rookie would have put that one first. Because a rookie in persuasion would have said, all right, I got to get this Russian collusion thing at the top of the list. I want everybody to think about how fake the Russian collusion is. But it wouldn't have worked as a first item, because you would have automatically said, well, we don't know yet. We don't know how that's going to turn out. It's not done. Mueller hasn't even read out his result. But putting it 11th completely works, persuasion-wise. And when you see how many things could have gone wrong with this whole event, and then you see that they didn't go wrong, they were actually quite cleverly, deftly, and expertly avoided in terms of the problems that could have happened. And then you see what he did right, which is kind of everything in this particular situation. It gets harder and harder to write any of this off as coincidence or luck or any other explanation. This is unambiguous persuasion genius, right? You can say what you will about his other qualities. You can have any opinion you want about his character, the things he's done good or bad. You can question his overall IQ, his intellect. You could even ask yourself if he's slowed down at age 71. You can ask all of those questions, and I will entertain all of them. But if you're talking about the narrow question of whether he knows how to do persuasion, I'm here to tell you, he's a genius. At that, at least. I don't know what else he's a genius at, but damn, he's good at this stuff. There's just no way around it. All right, let's talk about, and I know this will be a surprise to you, although you saw it in the title of the Periscope. Let's talk about Jordan Peterson. Now, those of you who have been watching my Periscopes know that I have banned his name from the comments, meaning that I've actually blocked people forever for mentioning Jordan Peterson's name. Not because I have any quarrel with him or anything he has ever said. Indeed, it's just the opposite. I don't know if I've ever seen anything I disagreed with. He's insanely smart. He's very persuasive. He's entertaining. He teaches us something just about every time you see him. He's solid gold. So I only banned him because I was just getting tired of people asking me about it. So I was just personally bored that I kept seeing his name so much in my Twitter feed, so I was banning it. So it has nothing to do with him. It only had to do with the number of people who kept, tweeting it at me and asking me the question. So today only, I want to talk about him, and I'm going to refer to, you'll have to Google this to find it. It's easier than giving you a URL. Appeared for a moment. Pushed the wrong button. So Google Jordan Peterson debate on the gender pay gap. All right, so it's Jordan Peterson debate on the gender pay gap. And then you'll see on YouTube, Then you'll see on YouTube an interview he had with, I don't know the name of the interviewer. It was a woman who was talking to him about the gender pay gap and men and women and some other topics. Now, I'm not going to get into any of the detail of the issue. All right, I want you to look for something else. I want you to look, Kathy Newman is the name. I want you to look for the number of times in that one interview. I don't know how long it is, 20 minutes, maybe, something like that. But look for the number of times he triggers the interviewer into an actual hallucination. And you'll see him laughing every time it happens, because he recognizes it for what it is, as a hallucination. Now, and there were so many of them, it was actually fascinating. And the way it happened was, she came into the discussion with a set of beliefs that she didn't think were going to change. Obviously, she expected to tear them apart based on how she imagined she would show him to be politically incorrect or whatever. But one time after another, he would, like a surgeon with a scalpel, he was dismantling her belief system in front of her. It was like he was, disemboweling her psychology, without anesthesia. And the result would be, she kept saying, "All right, so you're saying X," and he would just laugh and say, "I didn't say that. I never said those words. Nothing like that have I said. In fact, what I did say was," and it'd be something completely different. Now, the first one or two times you hear it, you say to yourself, "Oh, she had some bad assumptions, or she remembered something differently, and she's asking for clarification. She's just doing the job of a good interviewer. She's pressing him to make his points better." After you see it about the 12th time that she says something that, as a restatement of what he said, that is nothing like what he said, just completely different, and then he laughs and corrects her, you can see what's happening. She is quite literally hallucinating in front of you, and he's triggering each one of these. They're all different, but he triggers them one at a time by having an argument that she can't refute, but also can't accept. That's the trigger for cognitive dissonance. So I'll say it again. He makes an argument that she can't refute because the logic, let's say the professional credibility behind it, the reference to studies, it's so solid that she can't refute it, but she also can't believe it because it conflicts with everything she's believed up to this point. And that's what triggers her one time after another. It's fascinating to watch. So don't watch it believing that what you're seeing is somebody who's intentionally restating his opinions with some, let's say, evil intention. That's not what's happening. It looks like that, but that's not what's happening. The interviewer is literally hallucinating at least 12 different times. I didn't count them, but it's something like that. And man, it's interesting to watch cognitive dissonance right in front of you. Bam, 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 just like that. It was crazy. Let me give you another example of a similar thing, or at least a similar field, but a different thing. You've all been watching the different reports coming out of the Dhaka meeting, in which the word shithole was allegedly used, and some people question it. Now, if you're watching all the different people come out, and some people say, "Yes, he said that word, I heard it." "No, I was in the meeting, I did not hear it." "I was in the meeting, I totally heard it." Another person, "I was there too, didn't happen." All right, how do you interpret that? How do you interpret a situation in which you see different people coming out of the same meeting, but they have wildly different impressions of what happened? Well, I'll tell you how most people interpreted it. And this would be, you could call this the Cory Booker interpretation. Most people interpret it as some of the people coming out of the meeting were liars. Now, depending on which side you are, you thought the other side was the liars, and the people that you were inclined to agree with were the honest ones. That might be what's happening. All right? I can't rule out the possibility that more than one person got together and said, hey, let's just lie. Let's just lie. We'll say this happened, or the other side, let's just lie. Let's say let's just say it didn't happen. There were no cameras there. Let's just say it didn't happen. All right? So that's how probably most of the country looked at that story and said, all right, some of these people are just lying. Now, I've also suggested that it's possible that not everybody was paying attention all the time, so some people might have been, just missed it and might be telling the truth when they say they didn't hear it. But when they say it didn't happen, that's a stronger statement. All right? Let me tell you what probably is happening. It may be a little bit of spin combined with what I'm going to say, but here's my interpretation through the persuasion filter. I believe every person who came out of that meeting and told a story of what happened, no matter how wildly different those stories were, was telling the truth as they saw it. In other words, everybody came out of that meeting with a memory of the meeting, but they weren't accurate memories. And some of them just misremembered in a legitimate way. Now, how weird would that be, right? The answer is not weird at all. It is entirely common for people to see the same event and have completely different impressions of what happened right in front of them. There's a famous experiment in which, I think I've referred to this before. I don't know how to find it on YouTube, but you could probably Google, listen to the story and you might know what to Google. So this is a number of years ago. A professor did this experiment. So it was a college professor, and he had a big class of people, in sort of an auditorium-like setting, and it was just the professor as a lecturer. And he had staged a fake robbery that was going to happen, right there in front of the class. So he had somebody come in and grab something. I don't know, was it a woman with a purse? I forget the details. But a thief came in and stole something right in front of the class and then ran out. And then they separated the students and they said, describe what you saw. The stories were insanely different. And it was fresh in their minds. They came out of the same meeting, watched the same event, and walked out with completely different impressions of what happened. Now, if you've ever worked in the corporate environment, you know that you have a meeting with the boss, and especially if it's more so if there's any kind of emotional connection to the topic. If people are worked up about a topic, they go into a meeting, the boss says, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do A, B, and C. Does everybody understand? We're going to do A, then B, then C. Got it, everybody? Okay, leave. The people walk out of the meeting, and even as they're walking away from the meeting, down the hall, 30 seconds from the end of the meeting, one will turn to the other and say, well, I'm surprised that he told us to do X, Y, Z. And the other person will say, what? He just told us to do A, B, C. X, Y, Z never even came out of his mouth. What are you talking about? Now, if you've ever worked in the corporate environment where there are meetings, you know that is not an unusual event. That's a typical event. So when you're looking at the doc of people reading out what they heard or saw, you should know that it is possible, I don't think this is the case, but it's possible and would be completely within the realm of what I would call normal for a few people to imagine they heard the word shithole when it didn't happen. Completely normal. The normal human brains of a bunch of people watching the same event and the same rule, you could hallucinate you heard that word. And if more than one person heard it, your brain says, oh, if more than one person heard it, it's definitely there, right? Not necessarily. Because if one person hallucinated it, which would be completely normal, walked out of the meeting and said, my God, why did you say shithole? Then the other people would say, well, I didn't hear it, but suddenly they'd sort of imagine they heard it. Right? Now, I don't think that's what happened. I think in this case, they were using the language that has been reported. But it is true that the people who say they didn't hear it, totally legitimate in the sense that they might remember it exactly the way they're saying, it didn't happen. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. That means they don't remember it right. Now let me take this down to the next level. Everything that matters about that event, whether he said shithole countries or not, and where he said Norway, etc., everything about that depends on the very specific way the president worded it, his tone, the context, how quickly he, how soon after the comment about some countries did he mention Norway? Was it a separate conversation or just another thing he said in a slightly different context? All of those things are almost impossible to imagine everybody would walk into the meeting and report them the same way, right? It's a perfect setup for everybody to see what they want to see. So I don't think there is any way for us to know precisely what the president was suggesting, saying, and certainly we don't know what he was thinking. That's just crazy to imagine you know what he's thinking. So it's unknowable. If it's not on camera, people are walking out of the room with completely different memories of the same event, and that's just a normal situation. All right, I'm looking at your comments. Somebody says they think Durbin paraphrased. Well, here's the thing. They all paraphrased, because it would be weird if anybody could walk out of a meeting like that and be able to do a verbatim, read back of what was said just before the president, what he said, what was said after. It has to be a paraphrase, because nobody can remember that well. U.S. just found 6 more ships supplying North Korea from China. Well, I've got a feeling that there are 6 ships that are about to have mechanical difficulties. They might have such bad mechanical difficulties that maybe an engine will blow up. Could happen. All right, so I had a little Twitter exchange this morning. One of my Twitter regulars sent me an article in which the claim is made that China wants North Korea to keep their nuclear weapons. They just act like they don't. And the claim is that China has a strategic advantage in keeping North Korea a nuclear nation. And that story has been sold to us as essentially unquestioned fact for 20 years. I would like to call bullshit on that. So I don't know if there will ever be a way to validate my prediction or not. My prediction is that there is no rational reason that China wants a nuclear country on its doorstep that is attracting a potential nuclear strike by the United States. Because if we attack North Korea because of these nukes, we're going to be living there for a while. They don't want that, right? And it seems to me that with modern warfare, if we have a base in South Korea, we're kind of close enough. Does anybody really think that what the United States would do under any condition, that the United States would put boots on the ground on the border of China with the intention of invading with human beings the biggest army the world has ever seen? I don't know if that's true, but it probably is. In what world would we ever consider putting boots on the ground on the border of China with the intention of physically attacking? And we don't really need to put missiles and bases and stuff there. I mean, we've got enough. We have 100 ways to destroy China if we were ever so crazy to want to do that. We don't need a little extra. So this is not a prediction. I'm going to give you speculation. My speculation is that there must be some player or players, and I don't know who, that have something to gain by making us think that China doesn't want to solve this problem. My presumption, and there's no way I can prove this, is that China's leadership would like their companies to stop trading. It's just that they can't control what every company does in the ocean. There would just be no way for them to do everything they need to do to make it happen. Plus, there may be some complications with some corporations in China. They might have family connections with the government, and it might just be harder than you think it is for China to clamp down. So the entities that I could imagine might want to keep up what I think is fiction, which is the idea that China wants North Korea to have nuclear weapons. Honestly, it's laughable to even think about it. The only entities I could think that would want to keep that fiction would be either Russia, maybe? I don't know. I'm not even sure why. Or the United States military complex. So there may be people in the arms dealing business who want to sell this story that that China isn't going to solve this problem, so we need to buy a lot of weapons. Man, you better buy a lot of weapons because China isn't even willing to solve it. So imagine the difference between thinking China is willing to work with us versus believing China is only going to cheat and not work with us. How does that change what you do? Well, if you're Trump, you say, okay, I believe it. I believe they're willing to work with us. And so you push that lever forever because it's going to work eventually. You don't know how long it'll take, but it's going to work. Now suppose you don't believe China is a serious player in terms of getting rid of nukes in North Korea. In that case, you might push them a little bit. It doesn't work, and you say, well, it didn't work in the 6 months we tried. It's got to be that the stories were right all along. China isn't really trying, because they don't want it to change. All right? So your belief about China's intentions changes how much you spend on arms. Because right now, we could go the cheap route. We're probably not, but we could go the cheap route of putting infinite economic pressure. Eventually, China will get a handle on it. It might take a long time. It could be 3 years, and it could be that we have to put lots of pressure on the sea and lots of things. But a full press economic attack on North Korea can only happen under the condition that you think China is willing to get it done. It's just hard, even hard for them, harder than it looks, because they can't control all their companies doing things all the time. All right. But President Trump apparently believed that they were serious about helping. Obviously, they need a little, the more pressure you put on them, the harder they'll try. That's just how the world works. So I'm going to call bullshit on the idea that China doesn't want to denuclearize North Korea. Never believed it before, don't believe it now. And I also don't believe the They're worried about the influx of immigration, because while that is a big problem, it's not as big a problem as a nuclear North Korea that starts a nuclear war on their border. I mean, those aren't even close. Somebody says, I think you're wrong on this one. I could be. But somebody would have to present me with a rational argument of why China would want to keep a problem rather than solve a problem, which is what it boils down to. Yes, so South Korea and North Korea talking nice about the Olympics is more of a wedge strategy than, a clean win from our point of view. So you have to watch that. They may just be trying to drive a wedge between South Korea and America in terms of how we're dealing with their nukes. All right, I weigh 167 pounds in Trump pounds. All right, so have you noticed that President Trump, probably accidentally, but I don't know, every now and then there's something that looks so clever that I can't tell if it's intentional or just a lucky win. But let's say it's true that President Trump's reported weight is not as high as it should be. Let's say that's true. There are two explanations for that. One is he just doesn't want to report his weight as that high. Here's the second explanation. He just made everybody on the left a fat shamer. They don't want to be, but they're all fat shamers. Do you know how many voters in the United States are overweight? Almost all of them. Do you know who doesn't vote? Young people. I mean, not in great amounts. And do you know what young people are? Not nearly as overweight. Not even close. People who vote are older. They eat what the president eats. They weigh what the president weighs, or some version of it. He turned the entire critic base into fat shamers. He became them. He turned them into their own enemy. Right. So now he has the media turning on itself. The Washington Post, has the correction to the New York Times story or whatever it was. He's got them fact checking each other as fake news. And now he's got his entire critic base fat shaming in public every day. Now, I'm not going to tell you that was intentional, because the alternative story that he just shaded his weight because he didn't want to say how high it was is entirely possible. But how many times do you have to see something so perfectly designed in terms of persuasion before you say, okay, maybe they're not all what I think they are? Some of these are clearly confirmation bias, but that's a lot of stuff to get right. All right. But the other thing is, I had noticed, I'm not sure if I'd mentioned it on Periscope, I think I had a few weeks ago, I thought I noticed that he had lost weight. And I'm comparing his current weight to some of his golf pictures. There was a point where he seemed to reach some maximum weight where he had a golf shirt on. And it seems like they were taking his heaviest picture as opposed to his current weight. It's hard to tell because he's a big guy and he's got a suit. But he looked to me lighter, and that would make a lot of sense, because when you're on the road, you're eating all crap. But when when your White House chef gets involved, the food that's available to you, unless you make a big deal about it, is going to be the White House chef's food. And I got a feeling that his job is to keep the president alive, right? If you're the White House chef, job one is keep the president alive. Job two, healthy. So he's probably losing weight just because he's under, White House care, and he may be taking it a little more seriously for all the right reasons. but how about a Trump-free Periscope? You wouldn't want to watch that. All right, that's all for now. I'm going to go drink some coffee and enjoy my day. The rest of you enjoy your day too. And check out my blog post. And if you haven't purchased my book, Win Bigly, what the heck's wrong?